everybody. I'm Morgan Straub. I am the Vice President of the Third Freedom here at Dakota Wesleyan, and I was also in charge of the marketing and PR of this conference, so I'd like to thank you all for being here today. I have the privilege of introducing one of our keynote speakers today, Gary Oppenheimer. Gary is a World Food Prize nominee, CNN Hero, 2013 Purpose Prize Fellow, ABC News Best Person in the World, Huffington Post Greatest Person of the Day, winner of the Russell Berry Foundation's Making a Difference Award, and has received the Points of Light Tribute Award. Oppenheimer is the Executive Director and founder of AmpleHarvest.org. As director of a community garden in 2009, he learned about the wasted food in many plots and created a program called Ample Harvest to get the excess food to local food pantries. Realizing this is a nationwide problem, he created a nationwide solution called AmpleHarvest.org to use the internet to educate, encourage, and enable millions of growers nationwide to share their ample harvest with local food pantries in all 50 states. We are privileged to have Gary here, and if you'd like to give him a welcome, that would be great.
Thank you all very much. Can you all hear me? Okay. Very often I go and I do a talk and I say, turn off the cell phones. I'd like you to leave them on. I'd like you to silence them, but text, please. I want you to share this information that we're going to talk about with your network of friends and family across the entire country. If you're on Facebook, you can do the same there too. And periodically, you'll be seeing a piece that's in red over there, in quote, which is an idea that you might want to tweet out, but otherwise just send out what you think is important to you. This is a website that I'd like you to get, when you get a chance, go to worldfoodclock.com. We were going to bring it up here. We decided not to. Do it at your leisure. It's a real-time look at some frightening numbers that we're going to be talking about today. So a bit of introduction. I just got all the awards, but really in heart, I'm an aging geek. I'm a long-distance bicycle rider. I'm a gardener. I'm a dancer, and I am a CNN hero. But really, at heart, what drives me a lot is I have a passion. I hate waste. I always have. I grew up as a child with the admonition of finish what's on your plate. Kids are starving in Europe. In 2008, a gentleman named Bill Marsh, who's a photographer for the New York Times, published this photograph, and it stuck with me. This is a representation of the amount of food wasted by a family of 4 in 1 month in America, a pound a person a day, about 100 billion pounds a year in this country of food that's not being consumed. This stuck with me. So we're going to talk a little bit about the food we lose, the food that we're not eating, because it's very important to the discussion we're dealing with here about hunger in South Dakota and a much larger picture, the discussion of hunger across America. So you should know that 50% of the produce that this country grows never gets consumed. Half of the produce doesn't get consumed by anybody. You should know that 6% of the farmland is not actually harvested, that 36 million tons of food are going to landfills, which is creating a huge environmental problem. We're losing a pound a person a day, 122 pounds a month. This isn't a new problem. This is a really cool book I found in England. It was a book published by the U.S. Army for soldiers in World War II in 1942 going to England. And the part in yellow says, waste means lives. It's always been said that Americans throw more food into the garbage than any other country eats. This is not a new problem for us. It's been going on for a very long time. The USDA put out a report along with the NRDC, the National Resource Defense Council, which showed excellent guides on the food that we're not consuming. 2% of our potatoes, 8% of the corn, 8% of the wheat, 6% of the farming land is simply never harvested. So while on the one hand we're talking about food, on the other hand we're throwing away enough food every day to fill the Rose Bowl every day. This is from Jonathan Bloom, an excellent writer about his book, American Wasteland. What's been missing in all these numbers, and these are vitally important numbers, is the fact that no one has ever looked at how much food is lost from America's home and community gardens. I'm a master gardener, but I'm one of 42 million people in this country who grow food in a garden. And theoretically, about a third of this audience should be either gardening or maybe have someone in the family who's gardening or growing food. we haven't looked at how much food is lost. But I think we've all heard stories of, or worse, been victims of people who tried to force on us food that was grown in our gardens when we grew more than we could use, preserve, or share with friends. And I can promise you from personal experience that there's only so many cucumbers you can give to friends and still have them call you a friend. So I want to talk about that a little bit now. This is from the National Gardening, and you think it's funny, but it's a real problem because I'm told that in the South, people will lock their cars when they go to work. It's not because they're afraid the car's going to get stolen. They don't want to come back to a car full of zucchini. This is a nationwide problem. 35% of the households are growing food. That's 42 million people. 9 million urban households. This is not just something the suburbs and the rural areas are doing. And the average harvest for a home gardener is in the hundreds of pounds. It's been growing dramatically. We have a 17% increase in home garden. Millennials, the students here, 63% increase in people your age are starting to get into gardening and growing. Community gardening is up to 200%. So this is a rapidly growing piece of what America is doing, both for fun and for nutrition. But the side that you've been hearing about this morning about hunger is the other side of the equation that we should really be looking at. What's the cost to America of the hunger and the food insecurity we've experienced? These 23 states represent 50 million people, the estimate from the number of people in this country who are food insecure. That's greater than the entire population of Canada. The impact is horrendous, particularly in our children, where 1 out of 4 kids, except if you're Black or Hispanic, that's 1 out of 3, under the age of 6 is living in a food insecure home. And by the way, the statistics today are that 1 out of 3 kids growing up will be diabetic, and we're quickly moving to 1 out of 2. Now you can blame Xbox and inactivity for some of it, but a good deal of it is the quality of the food that a lot of kids are getting. 3/4 of the young people who say I'd like to serve the country are rejected by the military because they're not fit to serve. 3/4. This is a national security issue. The impact on our national health can't be understated. It affects childhood obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, etc. But if you look at a bigger picture, if you think for a minute what actually happens when you have people who are not well and what the cost to the nation is, it's in excess of $1 trillion a year that this nation is paying. These are not my numbers. This is from the CDC, American Diabetes Association, other organizations. $444 billion for diabetes, for heart disease, $245 for diabetes, and $344 for obesity. This is almost twice our national defense budget is what the nation's paying because of the impact of the quality of the food that we are getting. So on the one hand, we have all these people like myself who grow food, often more than we can use and share with friends. And on the other hand, when we try to share, we've traditionally gone to a food pantry or food drive, we've been told jars, cans, boxes, no fresh food. That disconnect is a huge problem. Now, Feeding America South Dakota is here. You've been learning a little bit about the food banks. I'm going to tell you a bit more about how the food safety net in America works. So, if you look up on the map there, we have a central membership organization called Feeding America. It's got about 200 food banks that belong to it. And connected to these food banks are what are called agencies. Food pantries, soup kitchens, these are the programs in the community that actually distribute food to the families that really, really need it. So what happens is, and I had the tour of the food bank here. It's a wonderful food bank. It looks like many others across the country. It looks just like this. It's a warehouse. Large shipments of food are stored there. And that food is ultimately sent to local food pantries across the country, 33,500 of them. And from there, the food then goes to feed the people in the community who really need it. Here's the problem. You see that line? That's a timeline. The time it takes for food to get from a food bank to a local program can be measured in days or weeks. Perfectly good for jars, cans, and boxes. Doesn't work for fresh produce by and large. You can't have a tomato or a head of lettuce that's going to survive for days or weeks. And that's in large part why we've been told all this time, no fresh food. So the result is that people like me, and Sean over there, by the way, he's from Texas, have been just either allowing food to rot in the garden or composting it, or worse, throwing it in the garbage, which then adds to the waste stream and contributes to climate change. In other words, it's bad all the way around when we've been wasting food. And we do end up growing more. I just came out of a long New Jersey winter, and I just can't wait to get my tomatoes started, and I know I'm going to grow too many already. So what's the solution? Remember, I described myself as an aging geek, and I had realized in 2009 that this was not a problem that couldn't be solved. It just involved connecting the dots. How do you get gardeners be able to donate food to local food programs? And what I realized that we really needed was a Google-type device. We needed on the one hand, the ability for growers to donate food, and we had to tell the growers that they could donate the food. Remember, you don't go down the street and see signs saying food pantry, want food. You generally don't know where a food program is. You need a search engine. They're not generally on Google, for example. So what I realized was a two-tiered approach was needed. One was a search engine, or online tool to find the programs in your neighborhood that want the food. And you needed an educational program to tell you that you could donate the food. In other words, bypass the food bank. Once you do it, food could then start flowing to the local food pantries, and then from there to the people in the communities who really, really need it. There we go. So in 2009, I had an idea, and 2 volunteers, we built a website and a program called ampleharvest.org. And what you're looking at is how it would work if you were here. You would go onto ampleharvest.org, pretend you're a gardener, you would put in your zip code, up a list of food pantries in your area that are registered. And I do have to say that unlike many other states, South Dakota doesn't have many yet, and we're going to be working very hard with Feeding America South Dakota to fix that across the state. But you would find a food pantry that's registered. Once that food pantry comes up, you would then have the information you need to donate to that particular food pantry. The interesting thing that makes ampleharvest.org work so well is, number one, the food pantry gets the opportunity to tell you the day of the week and the time to donate the food. This is really, really, really important because the food pantries have always been afraid of, we don't have refrigeration, we don't have storage. Well, if the pantry tells you when to bring the food, like a few hours before the clients come to pick up the food, then you, the gardener, know when to harvest the food a few hours before you take it in. That means the food that you harvest goes to the pantry, goes out to the clients on a same-day basis. No refrigeration, no storage, and the clients are getting food fresher than you and I can buy in a supermarket. Just think about that whole process. It's local food, freshly harvested, getting the people who have the least access to it. Amen. Thank you. So these are some of the sample pictures we've gotten from gardeners who have donated food. Small farmers have donated food. And by the way, this is a behavioral change because once you know you can donate the food from your garden to a food pantry, you are likely to do so for the rest of your gardening life. I want you to understand this. This is a wholesale change in the behavior of 42 million people, gardeners, much the same way we changed our lifestyles in the 70s and 80s when we started recycling instead of throwing food in the trash. Once the food comes in, it's at a food pantry, and then the clients, when they come in, for the first time have access to fresh food, freshly harvested fresh food. The idea of sharing the food is not new. It comes from the faith community. I mean, it's in Luke, it's in Deuteronomy, it's in Leviticus. The idea of gleaning, for example, not picking up the food that you drop, leaving the edges and the corners of your fields unharvested for the poor, the widow, the traveler, spelled out in Leviticus, for example. So the idea of sharing and taking care of your neighbor is part of the faith community in general. Okay. There we go. Hopefully this is going to work. Please. Okay, what you're not hearing, it worked a moment ago.
The response to this initiative has been overwhelming. I mean, all kinds of faith communities have been stepping up. Muslim community leaders are hosting sports tournaments to encourage young people to get active. The Jewish Community Centers Association is working with JCCs around the country to grow gardens and to get fresh food in underserved areas. And they're creating early child wellness programs. Groups like the National Council of Churches have joined with an organization called Ample Harvest to help gardeners donate fresh produce to 4,700 of their local food pantries.
This was the first lady speaking on the first anniversary of Let's Move. And for those of you who are not familiar with the program, this is a program that the First Lady put together to encourage particularly younger people both to eat healthy food and to exercise. The issue, frankly, is that for all the preaching the First Lady did about eating healthier, and Michael Pollan, and Jamie Oliver, and many, many others, without the access to the healthier food, all the preaching and begging doesn't go anywhere. You can't eat healthy if you don't have the access to the food. The idea behind ampleharvest.org is to make sure that that food gets in. We have the food we need to take care of ourselves. We simply need to use the food that we already have. Ampleharvest.org itself works with the faith community in a large way. We have landing pages that are tailored to the Christian, to the Jewish, and to the Muslim communities. Every faith community has its call to action in terms of making sure that we don't let people go hungry, that we take care of our neighbors. The ethical component of this is not often seen in many charitable endeavors, but I thought it was important in ampleharvest.org. Obviously, number one is helping the hungry. Gleaning comes right out of the Old Testament. There's an interesting piece in here that I did want to talk about just for a moment. There is the ethics of not humiliating the recipient of charity. And so the idea here in ampleharvest.org is that because of the timing, if the food comes in a few hours before the clients pick it up, the donor and the recipient may well be friends and neighbors. And frankly, if I was walking in with food and you were the client picking up, I might be embarrassed and you might be humiliated. You shouldn't be, but you might be. By separating by time, there's an anonymity in there. The result is that I know it's going to somebody in my community and I don't know who. The recipient knows it's coming from somebody in the community, they don't know who. A major ethical component is added to the entire charitable component here of ampleharvest.org. And frankly, also is caring for the environment. It's an important piece too. We don't want things to go to waste. We don't want to ruin the environment. So what's the impact of ampleharvest.org? Number one, its efficiency is unparalleled. We have no logistics. Why? Because we have 42 million logistic points across the country. Each grower, him or herself, has the ability to take the excess food from their garden to the neighborhood food pantry. So we don't have any trucks, warehouses, or refrigeration. Secondly, the simplicity. It makes sense. This is a very simple idea. It's simply something that people didn't know they could do in the past and they can now do. The universality. The internet is pretty much everywhere in this country, which means the opportunity to solve this problem is pretty much everywhere in this country. And it meets some really pressing needs in this country, particularly the waste of food, hunger, nutrition, diabetes, the environment, and that list can go on and on. The innovations built into ampleharvest.org, and there are many, I just highlighted a handful. One is obviously the reduction of the waste of food. And by the way, you will periodically come across a discussion of what people call food waste. I hate the term food waste. It sounds like the slop you give to pigs. We're using the term wasted food, and even there we're looking for a better, more affirmative term. But wasted food is that missed opportunity with the food, and that's what we're focused on. We're using the existing infrastructure the nation has. We're not planting gardens. We're not making food pantries. We didn't build the internet. It's all there. We just work to bring it all together. It's a lifelong solution because once a grower knows that they can donate, they probably will for the rest of their gardening life. And by the way, each of those growers, this is a viral campaign, each of those growers then becomes the person who starts to spread the information to their friends and families in the neighborhood. They don't even talk about ampleharvest.org because once they know they're connected to St. Mary's Pantry or the YMCA Pantry, they will probably just send their friends and family right to that pantry. And that's the idea, is spread across the country that the solution to hunger is actually in our backyards. Reduction of the waste stream, and it actually lowers the nation's healthcare costs. When I rolled out ampleharvest.org in 2009, a gentleman in the Huffington Post wrote about it, and he said that he thought that this would lower the nation's healthcare costs. This was rolled out when the debate was going on about Obamacare, and I hadn't even thought about the health implications at the time. I just hated waste. I started to see the bigger picture this represented. So how did we go? May 20, 2009, ampleharvest.org rolls out in one food pantry in Pompton Plains, New Jersey, which is a town near me. 100 pantries a little while later, 500 on the 1,000th pantry signed up on October 15, 2009. It just happened to be World Food Day. I couldn't have asked for better marketing, but it went really well. And we continued to grow and grow and grow and grow Today, it's more than 7,200 food pantries across all 50 states that are now capable of receiving food. And the most recent ones to have signed up include San Marcos, Colorado, Clover, South Carolina, Wayne, Illinois, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Sierra Vista, Alabama, and Vermillion, I think it is, South Dakota. Pantries sign up. It's a very simple process. They do it online. We have 2 requirements. You must be or be affiliated with a nonprofit, and you must give your food away for free. So while I've been using the word food pantry, it can be a battered women's shelter, it can be a soup kitchen, it can be a summer feeding program. If it meets that criteria and it wants fresh food, and almost every program does, this is a game changer for the community. So what do each of those dots mean? Well, in the normal food program realm, everybody talks about how many meals, how many apples, how many pounds of food. We don't. First, I don't like the pound metric in fresh food. I don't think you can compare watermelon and spinach. The pounds don't make any sense. But the reality is that we're not feeding people, we're getting people fed. And it's a really important distinction. When you're not a food program, we're actually functioning as a pipeline. Or think of funnel. That orange circle there is 9-mile radius. The center is Miriam's Kitchen. It is a soup kitchen in Washington, D.C. that the White House donates their excess garden produce to from the White House Kitchen Garden. So you have a 9-mile radius circle. It's about 250 square miles. So I'm going to ask you to just think in your mind, how many gardeners and gardens are there in 250 square miles? Now think about the fact that part of that covers urban Washington, D.C., part of it's coming suburban Virginia, part of it's covering a more rural area. It's a mix. So is it 20 gardeners, 200 gardeners, 2,000 gardeners? It's going to vary based on where that dot is. But wherever that circle lays, think of it as a funnel that enables the food to be funneled down to that one food pantry during the harvest season. That's what each of those dots means. So the question is not how much food, it's really is how large an opportunity have we created to eliminate the waste of food. How many funnels are now available across the country? So multiply each of those dots, by about 250 square miles, except in Texas where everything, of course, is bigger. And you end up with a pretty good idea of the opportunity this represents to the country. Now, you're going to see something else on this map that has been bewildering me and many other people. There's a line down the center of the country. You'll notice that to the east, a fairly good density, the north and the west, but starting from Texas and going right up through here, we have a lot of work ahead of us in terms of getting more food pantries registered on ampleharvest.org. And something I'm going to ask all of you to do, whether it's here in Mitchell or your hometown, wherever it is reach out to the food pantries. 70% of the food pantries are in a house of worship, so the first place to probably start is your church and see, do you have a food pantry? And if they do, encourage them to sign up on ampleharvest.org. It's free, it's easy, and it's a no-brainer. Every time a dot shows up on ampleharvest.org, every time we have vetted it, it takes a day or so, then it goes live, it opens up a brand new opportunity for 250 square miles of gardeners in that community to start donating food. And then we start getting letters like, it's greatly appreciated by all our clients having fresh vegetables to enjoy during the summer months. I was recently interviewed by ABC News and Yahoo News in December, and they went to visit a food pantry. And that pantry reported that during the growing season, a third of the food they distribute in the growing season is locally donated fresh food, thanks to ampleharvest.org. That's not a promise that every pantry is going to get that volume of food, but it goes to the point of what the opportunity is when a pantry's up and they start receiving the food. And by the way, when a pantry comes up, we actually give them the tools to help promote it on a local level in terms of PR announcements, news stories, et cetera, et cetera. You heard I was a CNN hero. Let's see if this video works, or do I have to push it?
Every year, millions of hungry Americans rely on food pantries to eat. But often that means a diet of canned and processed food. So when this week's CNN hero saw that local pantries were lacking fresh produce, he came up with a simple way to help. Found it in his own backyard. Watch.
Pancake mix and syrup.
The system we have in America is you donate canned goods or dry goods to a food bank. Fresh produce is almost never available. Horseradish. I had an idea about how to not waste food. We're having an ample harvest, and the very least we can do is give it to people who need it.
They'll be enjoying this tomorrow at the pantry.
Ampleharvest.org enables people who grow food in home gardens to easily find a local food pantry to donate their excess produce to.
It's a nice big one. We didn't know what doors to knock on, but now that Gary has got this wonderful program, there's some rhubarb. Taking it to one of the pantries really is a good way to share with Ample Harvest.
AmpleHarvest.org gives them the ability to easily get that food to somebody who genuinely really needs it.
It smells good.
So you're not only doing good, you're feeling great about it.
Gary Oppenheimer's website is ampleharvest.org. See how one harvest can help a family in need.
Now, I gotta tell you that there was one piece of that story that may have gotten past you, but every time I see it, I cringe. CNN named me CNN Hero in April of 2010. I was honored. It was, believe me, it was an honor. It was amazing for AmpleHarvest.org, but I live in northern New Jersey. April 10, we still had snow on the ground. My garden wasn't doing anything. I happened to find, and I have a good-sized garden and several raised beds, so what did I have? I had horseradish that overwintered and happened to have started coming up early. I feel terrible for this poor kid who's going to be on TV for the rest of his life saying, about horseradish. And I'm sorry to say that the Rachel Ray show recently came to me for the same thing also when I had snow on the ground. So the B-roll people we have to do some work with. So we've received a lot of support. Google has been our biggest partner. We get almost $500,000 a year free advertising from them. We have major corporate partners. The White House, the USDA, Feeding America, all been very helpful and supportive organizations for us. So my passion, as I said earlier, was that I hate waste. And I had this idea in 2009 that instead of having food not be received by the food bank system because of its logistics, why not flatten the system and enable the food to get to a local food pantry? And that's when I created AmpleHarvest.org. It's a small nonprofit, and it has continued to grow. As you saw, it's nationwide. It's got all these really cool benefits, but one that I happen to think is the most important is actually solves a problem. The idea that every time a gardener knows that he or she can donate food, and every time a pantry comes up to receive food, we have diminished the amount of the waste of food in America for good. That's a solution to a problem. So the idea, and this is a contrast between how we have historically dealt with food in this country, with the food bank network, which is basically asking for money, getting food, getting people fed, and then coming back and asking for money. That cycle's been going on and on and on and on. We do get people fed. The food bank system is extraordinarily good at making sure that we don't have people starving to death on the streets, but the problem of hunger has not been greatly diminished. It's been growing. AmpleHarvest.org's model has been, let's get local food in the community connected to the need in the community, and at least on a permanent basis, address the issue from that perspective. It doesn't, by the way, I want to be clear about this, it does not replace food banks. Nobody grows cornflakes or bread in their backyard. The food bank network is going to be critically important, as will the SNAP program from the USDA and others, to make sure that we nourish this country. I had the privilege to actually tour the McGovern Museum here yesterday. And it's an absolutely lovely sculpture on the outside, but the senator had spoken about hunger a long time ago. What was interesting when I read this quote, I was thinking, did he know about the internet or think about the internet when he was writing it? With the idea that when he said, we will have the ability to provide food for all within the next 3 decades, sort of like a haunting suggestion as to where we were going to be going. But hunger's plagued the world for thousands of years. Ending it's the greater moral imperative now, more now than ever before, because for the first time, humanity has the instruments at hand to defeat this cruel enemy, and at a very reasonable cost. So I would like to open this up to questions. By the way, these are pictures, a random sampling of pictures that people have sent us of the food that they have donated to local food pantries. But while we're doing this, I also want you to make note of these URLs. If you want to do something about AmpleHarvest.org in your community, you can go to AmpleHarvest.org/action. There are a 4-step process you can go through there. If you want to support our work, AmpleHarvest.org/support. But we just now rolled out this week a whole new program. And this is in tandem with a small food company in Connecticut. and it's called Seeds for Good. If you go to ampleharvest.org/tasty, and if any of you like Indian food, this is what they do, by the way. They are distributing 5,000 packets of organic seeds for free. You sign up, they mail you the packets, you commit to take the produce you grow and donate it to a local food pantry. You find it on ampleharvest.org. Not only does this benefit the people in the community and does it help them feel good, but oh yeah, you have to remember that when you donate food to a food pantry, you can get a tax write-off. And if you go to the ampleharvest.org homepage, you'll find the form right on the page that you can fill in and give it to your accountant. And you actually, so if you get a free packet of seeds, you go $200 worth of tomatoes, you have a $200 donation to a charity. It's just a little extra there for you. So I'd like to open this up for any questions anybody might have about our work, about wasted food, or anything else, please.
So what's the seed company again? What is that?
It's not a seed company. Actually, the name of the company is Tasty Bite. And they are in Connecticut. They make really good Indian food actually for the American market. But they've been supporting ampleharvest.org along with a bunch of other corporate partners. And this was one of the really, I thought, interesting ideas. Yes?
Thank you for an absolutely wonderful presentation. I'm going to go become a master gardener so I can help contribute to your effort.
But you don't have to be a master gardener.
I know,
just to be clear.
I know. But
any gardener.
You inspired me. It's been on my to-do list, so thank you. I grew up in a children's institution, residential treatment center, and I want to especially thank you for your sensitivity to the issue of separating the donor from the recipient. I think that's a profound understanding that is so significant, and the fact that you identified it, put it on this page, to me is really remarkable and wonderful. Thank you for doing that. I'd also like to just broaden the discussion a touch as we think about this. Our opening address reminded us of the words of George McGovern, who pointed out that more people die of hunger than war. We recognize hunger as a significant problem. I, every morning, read our local newspaper, the Argus Leader, which I enjoy to pick up local news. But I'm always horrified on the second page of the Argus Leader to read what had happened the day before. And let me just read you the headlines in this morning's paper on this page. Driver flees hitting 8-year-old boy. 2 men accused of threatening with a gun. Man accused of threatening officers. Kidnapping charge dropped for plea. Police taking applications for 8. Man pleads guilty for underage sex case. DUI arrest, 258 tickets issued during patrol. I'd like for us to think today about how there's a relationship between what goes on and is described on this page and hunger. And I think we need to think of it in the very broadest of sense. Thank you.
There was actually no discussion in there of the number of kids who went to school malnourished or hungry because they didn't have the food.
That's my point. I mean, how many squirrely little kids that are driving teachers crazy, aren't learning, are probably hungry? How many kids in juvenile facilities or who were kicked out of school are hungry? How many people do we have in the penitentiary who grew up hungry? What role does hunger play in some of these incredible behavioral troubles that plague our society?
Thank you for bringing it up. One of the interesting challenges America faces is that we have, on the one hand, the discussion of hunger, and on the other hand, the epidemic of obesity. We are actually an exceedingly well-fed yet malnourished nation. The food that we've been providing to ourselves has not been the best it could be. It has not been the best of what we produce. We've been wasting a lot of that. And that's what ampleharvest.org is needed to try to address. And so I'm hoping that each of you in your own way will help to spread the awareness, get involved, whether you choose to start growing, supporting our work, spreading the news through your networks, or through government programs. I mean, we work with the federal government. As you can see, we've been blessed by both the Michelle Obama's Let's Move initiative and work also with the President's office, work with the EPA, the USDA, all seeing their pieces of what this idea of the elimination of the waste of food and getting it to the people who have at least access to it, what that can actually do for the future of the country. And I also need to say one other thing. We are in the 50 states, and even though you didn't see Hawaii and Alaska on the map, we're there too. This is a global issue. So the gentleman I referred to earlier, Jonathan Bloom, who talked about all the food in the Rose Bowl, he and Tristan Stewart, who are both a part of our organization, speak about this on a much larger scale. This is a global issue. The waste of food takes place in all continents, and it takes place in all communities here. So, any questions? Two, yeah.
When I saw the horseradish, I thought, that's very cool. I wouldn't have a clue what to do with that, and I love to cook. I'm curious if there, you know, when people aren't used to fresh food and knowing what to do with zucchini or whatever it might be, is there any way for them to know what to do with it when they get it? You know, a tomato is easy, but some things aren't.
It's a really good question. I mean, there have been times I've grown strange things like purple carrots, and my wife would ask, "What is this?" And I wouldn't know what to do with rutabaga myself. We are very narrowly focused on getting that fresh food into the system. There are other organizations that are working on both ends. There are many that tell you how to garden, and there are others that are helping the pantry clients. Probably the best known one, strength.org, has a program where they send chefs actually to food pantries around the nation, teaching people how to cook. I was just recently informed last week that somebody's published a book for food pantries, a cookbook, so that people will know. My argument is that we should be telling the pantry, and the pantry should tell the client, what is this? This is Swiss chard, or whatever it is, and then you find out in your own community, and maybe in your own culture, what do you do with it? I can tell you my German Jewish grandmother and a Creole grandmother will prepare rice very differently. So we're not going to tell you how to prepare the food, but at least once you know what it is, then you can find out. But that's where the pantry can come in with support, or local chef programs, or strength.org. But it is an important thing. Too many people are displaced from what fresh food should be like. Too many kids grow up thinking that apples normally come pre-sliced in cellophane. They don't have the idea that a peach is something that actually dribbles down your cheek and doesn't come out of the can. We need to bring the fresh food in so that it's not an unfamiliar thing in the kitchen. Thank you. Was there another question here?
I just was about the same thing, that I also thought, I heard the snack program, and I thought, you know, I'm in the summertime would be a great time when we can have the kids come and get fresh fruit and vegetables there. But I work with a lot of the supervisors. I know a lot of moms that don't know how to cook anything. It's hard for restaurants to find employees right now. It's hard for, I work in a assisted living facility. It's hard for us to find people to work there that know how to cook anything. And so, and that can include some information from the programs, and I can see how some of those could be used as facilitators. If we have fresh food coming, then kids can come with their moms to get it and maybe sample some of the stuff there. So
Yeah.
it's a wonderful program.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be around all day today. I'm going to be around much of tomorrow, at least through lunch. So anybody who wants to chat, has questions, has ideas, has energy, I'd love to talk to you. But I think my time's up. So, no more questions? Thank you very much. Thank you.